You're watching Casually Baked, the podcast, home base for the canna curious. Thanks for tuning in.
It's high time. We had a high time together.
Settle in. It's time to get casually baked. Tina, thank you for having me at Moonmade Farms. It's absolutely beautiful here.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I mean, it's been such a long time coming. We've tried to plan this a few times.
We have. You know, we were supposed to do this in Oakland a few months ago, and I can't remember, but it's a layered life, and I cannot remember why fate brought us here instead of Oakland.
Well, it's harvest, and I am like a little kid in a candy store right now, or it's my Christmas Eve, so maybe that's why. But I want to start by talking about, you know, you're no stranger to a counterculture, and there's a part of your life that happened way before cannabis, but that kind of oozes into everything you do. So I'd like to talk about kind of your roots in San Francisco before you made it out to Humboldt.
I was born and raised in San Francisco, and lived for a while in Santa Cruz, moved back to San Francisco. And when I was in Santa Cruz, I really discovered rock and roll. I mean, I'd always loved rock and roll, but while studying film, video, and photography, I started playing drums and just jumped right into a band. And I became obsessed with drums for the next 20 years. And so I was like, all I cared about was playing drums, practicing, playing shows, recording, and it was my life.
Now, did you tour, or were you playing within San Francisco and kind of the Bay Area?
I was playing in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and we did a lot of van touring and like living lean, like very DIY. And it was a really beautiful time. It was incredibly modest. It was like brown rice and, you know, a steamed vegetable, and it was top ramen and eating what the clubs gave us. It was like a pizza and a couple beers.
Yeah.
And really just digging into like the creative pulse for so long.
Yeah.
That was the ultimate priority.
So it was like, you know, living on love, so to speak. Your passion was fueling you, not necessarily all of the money you were making.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wasn't business driven in any way. It wasn't about that at all. It was really about pure expression and finding others to have that pure expression with and being in like a flow state.
Yeah.
And finding that and being in it, and being in those states where it's like it's functioning beyond or outside of time. It's like nothing is there except for playing music, and there's this biofeedback happening with the crowd.
So tell me where cannabis fit in with all of that. Like, did you use a lot of cannabis while you were a musician, or was it kind of just tell me.
You know, I was like a sporadic pot smoker. And at a certain point, I got really into smoking pot because it was really fun to write songs or write riffs.
Yeah.
And like super simple riffs, but it was terrible for finishing. And so I have all of these like beginnings of songs, you know, but for me, it just never really went anywhere other than like, there's all of these pieces and all of these riffs and all these like parts of melodies, you know, and recorded, which is cool. And went into like a really long composition at one point, but it was never totally, like I never totally saw that project through.
Yeah. Well, and I find the same thing for myself as a writer, where, you know, something will come to me and it seems so good that you're like, I won't forget this. But if you don't write that shit down, you do forget it. And so I will periodically, every few months, go around gathering up sticky notes and little notebooks and all of the things, and like going back and reading through it and being like, oh yeah, I can do something with that. Or like, this is just totally stoner garbage, like throw this away. But you know, you can get those little nuggets that might end up being able to be pieced into something else down the road. And I like the way cannabis does that for me in my creative process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible like shapeshifter or perspective shifter, and it can just kind of like get you into your head or out of your head or into your body or out of your body, just really depending upon what you need at that time.
Yeah. And like I was talking with John at King's View, asking the question like, what information am I seeking, or what do I want, or what do I need? And, and allowing the plant to show up for you in that way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is our teacher. This is our guide. Like, this is why we're all where we are, why we live here, why we're talking about this, why we're all completely obsessed with this plant.
Yes.
I went from being in love with playing drums to being in love with cannabis, like as a living plant. Like, I am in love with cannabis.
So talk to me about that relationship and how you ended up here.
Well, a friend of mine insisted that I get out of San Francisco. This is 13 years ago. And so I came up, and at the time she wanted to introduce me to two people. And one of those people was a woman named Joni Hannon, and she was a jazz drummer. And she was the first older female drummer I'd ever met in my life. And I was always like lightly seeking, like, when am I going to meet my drummer mentor?
Yeah.
And I never found that person. And as soon as I met Joni, we sat down, and she's in her late 70s. She starts telling me stories, and we started like tapping on things and just like motioning to each other, and we got to talk drums.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
You got to talk drums through drums.
Yeah. She had a drum
rhythm.
set.
Yeah. Yeah.
My dear friend Valerie Agnew, she's the person who brought me up here, and she's also a drummer. And she went to Heartwood, which is like very close in the neighborhood.
I'm enjoying it currently.
Wonderful. Heartwood Mountain Sanctuary.
Yes.
Fantastic. I highly advise people to come up and visit and check it out. And it's a great way to be in the heart of the Emerald Triangle.
Yes. And you're going to stay for a while. So once you get here, you want to just stay put for a few days. It's quite a trek. And it's, I really did. I was like, this is like an amazing race adventure, and one everybody should have, especially during harvest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like the culmination of 8 months of effort and presence and care and love and intention, all focused on these plants. And at the end of 8 months, it's like a kind of reckoning, or like you see it's the karmic consequence of how you've spent your time, the decisions that you made all along.
Yeah.
And you can see all of it. It's an incredible form of storytelling.
Yes. All right. I pulled you away from the drum circle. So
right. So drum set, right? And so then this was rock and roll. Like, I loved playing rock and roll. But Joni was a jazz player, so she had chops, and she was like a technically trained like drummer, whereas I completely taught myself. And so I would watch her. She's like in her late 70s. She's on oxygen, and she could just rip. Like, she was so good.
It's so fun.
Amazing.
Did you have videos of y'all playing together?
Well, what ended up happening was I met Joni, and the night I met her, I decided when, we left the visit, and I decided that someone needed to make a documentary about Joni, and so I just had to do it. And so I ended up making this documentary about Joni, and it did the festival circuit a few years ago. And
what's the name of it?
Joni, Queen of the Paradiddle.
All right. Where can I hear it? Or, where can I watch it?
You can see it on Vimeo.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, I want to check it out.
Cool. And maybe we could post that so people can meet Joni.
Absolutely. It'll be in the show notes for certain.
So Joni and her partner, Marion, ended up just being my dear friends. So I transitioned up here and onto another farm with my now ex of a couple of years. And during that time, got to be really good friends with Joni and Marion as I'm going through the documentary process and everything. And they just became my pals. And that's who I wanted to spend time with when I had some time.
Yeah.
And a couple of years after being here, 1.5, 2 years, Marion called me up and she said, Tina, I never want to pick up a bag of chicken shit again. You want to buy the place or what? And I certainly wasn't really in a position to do that, but figured out how to make it happen.
Had you ever even thought about owning your own pod farm?
No, absolutely not. No. It's the furthest thing that I could have imagined doing 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's like absolutely like it's my life's purpose. And
Isn't it funny how the universe does that? I love that so much. And a lot of the true sun-grown farmers who are just like, I don't get to spend enough time in my garden, like those people, it's just such a, what is the word I'm looking for? Serendipitous way of how they became farmers.
Well, it's cool that you would say that because the farm's name, this property's name is Serendipity.
Oh.
Yeah, this is what Joni named it. And so in the medical days, I had Serendipity Collective, which was a medical collective, and that became Moon Made Farms.
So tell me, how did you dream up Moon Made Farms?
Well, soon after being here, and first off, I think it's really important just to kind of detail this out a little bit. Like, this whole experience has been this major transition and really a process of discovery, because the last thing I would have imagined doing was being a farmer of any kind. Like, I didn't have houseplants. Like, friends would bring houseplants over, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this,
Yeah, how long until it's dead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe take it outside or take it home because I have to go on tour next week, and
Yes, that's the way my life was.
And I just had absolutely no sense of the natural world. We would be on tour somewhere, and my bandmates would want to go hiking, and I was like, no, let's go to the record store. Like, why go hiking? What do you go hiking to do?
So you were just kind of detached from the whole nature thing.
I was completely detached. Like, I was full on urban city reality, like would go from indoor space to indoor space on a bike and really not pay attention to the natural world and the natural forces. And it was cannabis. It was cultivating cannabis, like getting into the first year of growing and the process of like from seed to going into the ground to like watching this incredible plant grow. And then 8 months later, harvesting this plant. And I was just like, suddenly I cared so much about like the air, the quality of air. And I cared about water and the quality of water. And I cared about like, well, what is this plant in? And I started caring about the soil, and I started caring about like the nutrients. Like, what is this plant eating? How does it eat? And I just
did it make you question all the cannabis that you had smoked before? Like, oh, like what is, like that to me seems like a correlation that not enough people think about or consider. If you just go somewhere, most people, they have a joint, they'll share a joint with anybody, that there's no questions asked. You don't know where it came from or what's in it. And, and I think that's something that there's a lot of care to everything that you do here.
Well, when I think back to when I was like smoking pot from the time I was a teenager, and once again on and off, because I would have a really great experience, then I'd have a really terrible experience, then I'd have a great experience, and then I'd have a terrible experience. It was really inconsistent. And so I couldn't really rely upon like the experience becoming a relationship. It was like, it just felt like a game of roulette all the time.
Like dating.
Like exactly. Yep. There is like cannabis Tinder now. Have you heard about this?
Well, I've seen a couple of them. I did actually log on to a few, but it was like there weren't enough of us to be. I'm like, oh, there were 10 people. I saw them all. I guess, maybe I should check back in. Well, there was like, oh, hi, or hi there or something, maybe in the one. What's the one that you know of?
Oh, I was actually just making it up.
Oh, no, it's a real thing. It really is.
You mean for dating?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was thinking like there should be basically like find your bud. Find your flower.
Oh.
There should be findyourflower.com.
Well, there's some scientific versions of that, like confident cannabis, because it's like gets down into the super dirty, nerdy stuff, like the entire chemical makeup of it, and you can be like, okay, if you like this, then you'll love this.
I think I think it's really critical. It's crucial, actually. And one of the things that I noticed, and over time, and I didn't understand until I started like really getting into growing this plant, is I started being attracted to like CBD THC ratios. And I didn't really know why. And then I started like using them, and I started, making tinctures or smoking them, and finding that it worked for me so much more and so much more consistently than straight THC or high percentage THC. And one of the things that I'm finding is that when I talk to women especially, and we start talking about cannabis, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't really like smoking cannabis. And I'm like, why? And they say, well, I used to get really bad anxiety, or I got an anxiety attack once, and I could never smoke again after that. And then I would ask them, what were you smoking? Do you know what you were smoking? Was it indoor or was it sun grown? Was it like chemical or was it organic? And was it high THC?
Most of them don't know any of the answers to the questions you just asked.
And that's a good starting place, right? And so something that I'm a huge fan of is like encouraging people to try and to like sample cannabis slowly and to titrate up, whether that's smoking or vaping or like edibles or whatever, right? To really titrate up, to go slow.
Yeah.
And also to start with a mixed or balanced ratio flower, and also low potency. Because you can always increase, but it's hard to decrease, right?
Well, and two, it's always way more fun to gradually step up and be like, oh yeah, that felt good, or I didn't feel enough of that, now a little more, versus, honey, we need to cancel those dinner reservations because I can't move off the couch.
Yeah, for sure. And, edibles are not for everyone. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Smoking is not for everyone. And that's the thing I think that getting to the core of this plant and this plant's power is that it really helps people learn about themselves.
Yeah, if they will listen and if they will go through those steps, because, we live in such a world where people are just like, just tell me what to take and tell me what my dose is. They don't want to think about it. But the beautiful part and the piece of cannabis that is so valuable is that it is this conscious connector. And so it's like, well, it does take some time. You do need to sit alone and be with your thoughts and, and set some intentions and keep a journal. And people, I think people are just moving too fast. And they need to, slow down and make time to create that relationship with the plant if they really want to use it in a way that is meaningful and medicinal.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really want to have a relationship with this plant, which is where it can provide so much. And like that introspection and just that exercise. And for some people, it's a moment of quiet. For other people, it will encourage them to be social. It's like, it's such an adaptogen, and it works with different people's chemistry. It's just the most incredible, subjective, intuitive plant. And it's interesting because I think that it's going to help people become more intimate with themselves and also each other. And in the shift of perspective that can happen with cannabis, and the shift of perspective and the shift of consciousness, like this is why this is such an important plant to nurture and to cultivate with care.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of segues into, the femininity of the flower, because, when you were describing that, you're mostly describing a woman and, the way a woman shows up in a room, the way a woman shows up for her partner or for her friends or her family. And so I would like to talk a little bit about your perspective as a female farmer, that's cultivating this plant that, could potentially, if people really dove in, could really change the consciousness, help raise the consciousness of our planet.
Oh yeah. I mean, this plant, which is arguably the most powerful plant on the planet, which expresses in the female form, is about to touch more people globally than ever before in history. Yeah. And this is incredible to be alive right now to witness this transition.
Or to be a female farmer right now.
And to be a female farmer feels incredible right now.
Yeah.
It's hard. And it is, and I think it's important that it's hard, because one thing that I think about every single day is like, how much devotion do I have to this plant? What am I going to stick out for this plant? You know, how much resilience do I have? How much resilience does she have? This is an incredibly resilient plant.
Yeah.
Look at what this plant has been through historically.
Right?
It's incredible. What a story, you know? And so I think that a huge part of this is to acknowledge the fact that, like, what is the shift of consciousness? Like, where is that coming from? What chemical compound is that, or chemical compounds, right? And basically it's the mating call. Like, we're talking about plant sex, right? And so at the end of the season, your favorite time of year, right around harvest, is
Mating season.
It's mating season. That's exactly what's up. And so these flowers are expressing in, like, their full expression. And it's dramatic and colorful and beautiful and loud. And they're the most, like, dominant scent in the garden by far.
Yeah.
And their scent travels, you know, and there's a resonance, there's a vibration. Like, the garden early morning is just humming with scent. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And
that is true. This morning when I got up and walked out of my cabin to go to the community bathroom, I could just being there, I could smell the cannabis from all of the farms all around me. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and I'm like, wow, like, that really is strong.
the nose gets really loud at about 5 in the morning. Really early morning.
That
There's
was
this,
fun
like,
to experience.
it's
I
like
didn't
there's
know
a
that.
release, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I wonder if it's, like, not unlike, you know, the birds in the morning, right? Or, like,
Yeah.
everything coming awake. And so this is a kind of consciousness shift that I experienced personally. It truly is like an awakening that I've been feeling out here, and just noticing year to year and season to season all of these things about the natural world that I'd never paid attention to. And I would have never considered without cannabis.
Yeah, me too. So how is all of these things that you're learning, how do you think that helps you differentiate yourself as a female farmer, or maybe some of your techniques or the things that you do are different than your male farmer friends?
So the thing that I learned about this plant and through this plant is that my lesson was learning to trust my intuition. And my ongoing teaching is about learning how to listen more clearly and deeply to my own, like, to my heart, to my gut, to my mind, my own thoughts. And it's not so much about learning something new as trying to shed the layers of what is not serving me and what I've
Yeah.
learned along the way. And so it's really, and I think it's a very ancient practice, which is getting to know yourself and trusting yourself and trusting your intuition. And this happened for me through cultivation. And so I started using, like, and it's like not unlike playing drums. Like, I never learned how to play drums. I never studied, right? I just started playing, and I used my intuition for that. And I felt into that, which was sometimes very uncomfortable because they're the most incredible technical drummers. And
Yeah.
sometimes drummers would want to talk the talk, and they'd be like, oh yeah, you're playing in this time signature or this time signature. And I'm like, great. Thanks for letting me know.
Thanks for letting me know. I'll write that down.
But it was just riffing. It was just playing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the
Playing
same.
is the key word.
Yes.
You were just playing.
We're just playing.
Do you need to refix those? It's okay.
I think it's,
You good?
how is it, Claire?
Well, if
Is it
you're
all right? I think I'm okay.
Okay, as long as it doesn't fly off backwards. But yeah, and that was the thing. I wanted to get paid to be myself because then I would feel like I was playing when I was working.
Well, there's also this whole piece about, like, assuming a role. And as a woman, I think, and I'm just thinking this out right now,
Okay.
but there's a piece around assuming a role that I never wanted to play that game. And I still don't want to play that game.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I recognized at some point is that I think one of the ways that we're conditioned in our culture is for men to choose and for women to be chosen.
Yes, and it grosses me the fuck out. Yes.
Is that true? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's exhausting. And it's, yes, like, I'm doing this thing. I feel really good about it, but turn around and look, like, are you accepting me doing this thing? Like, yeah. I think that might be why I'm still single, because I am very unapologetically this.
And good for you, because for you to be able to express yourself and be completely who you are, well, there you are.
Yeah.
You know, there you are.
And that is scary. That's scary for men to see a woman that is just like, oh, shit. Yeah. Like, if I want to be with that woman, I got to show the fuck up.
Absolutely.
So, how are you received by the male farmers? Like, you coming in, you are in the thick and the heart of it here in Humboldt. So, how has that transition been for you as a woman showing up in this space, being like, here I am?
Well, for the first 3 years I was here, I didn't meet many female farmers. Probably the first 6 years I was here. Maybe the first actually 9 years I was here. Going back in time now, because now I'm on year 13. So it's been a bit of a stretch. It's a good chunk of my life at this point.
Yeah.
And I would go to, I would go out like shopping, going to the stores, or pulled over on the sides of the road. Like there were lots of trucks and there were lots of men. And I was like, where are all of the women? And it was incredible, like going to, as this transition started, starting to go to like community meetings, and I would see all of these men. And I, realized at some point along the line that there weren't a lot of women cultivators out there. And it wasn't until I got involved with a group in southern Humboldt County called the International Cannabis Farmers Association when I started meeting other female farmers. And so that's when I met, for instance, like Sunshine Johnston, or Crystal Ortiz, or all of these women that now I'm just like, yes, these are these amazing, these amazing farmers. And we connect on farming, and perhaps in a slightly different way than I connect on with my male friends on farming. There's crossover, there's similarities and differences, But one of the pieces is like, to date, I will crack a book or I'll do some research, but more than anything, I like to observe. And I like to just observe and observe over time and try to learn from the inside out, like what's going on, and experiment and make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes and then keep experimenting and talking to people, which is really wonderful. It's a wonderful resource to learn how to learn. But first and foremost, it's been so much about like really observing this plant in its habitat and understanding how to work with the habitat in order to do right by this plant.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because I feel like the cannabis community here is, everyone will call it open sourced growing. Like everybody's like, we're here to share, we're here to uplift and, and help each other out. Do you find as a woman, like it still feels that way to you, or do you feel like there is some sort of an isolation, or does it feel like just one big family?
I think that there's both feelings, like there's definitely like your family or friend farmers who you call each other up when there's an issue and send each other photos and try to figure out what's going on. And you'd like totally celebrate the amazing moments and want to show someone like your beautiful flower or your beautiful garden, or, and there's a lot more of that now with social media, which is being on Instagram is pretty amazing actually, because it's the first time I've ever used social media in any way. And I always completely rejected it. But what's happening with farmers, and specifically like in the regenerative or regenerating, kind of farm world and emerging movement, it's so exciting to see what people are doing. And there's so much information sharing going on.
Well, and it's also a way for people who want to educate themselves a little bit more about cannabis, following these different farmers or groups that are really showcasing high quality, sun-grown product and why it's important and why it's different and what it's doing for them versus the other stuff out there. It's some people learn from listening, some people learn from watching, and some people have 15 seconds that they're willing to give something. So show them weed porn, give them like 2 seconds of a message, and you're out. But I can imagine that when you're out here in the middle of nowhere, like Instagram can feel like a lifeline to your community.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're pretty remote out here and everyone's fairly isolated.
Pretty
And-
remote.
And everyone's really busy. We're working really hard.
Yeah.
And not only on the farm and farming, but going through this transition. And the regulations are incredibly challenging. And so
Yeah.
we're all wearing at least 6 hats and just, and getting through that. And there's a kind of inspiration in like holding each other in that and supporting each other in that,
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, not unlike farming in general, there's a kind of resonance a kind of spirit that just sort of stretches through all of this, and that is one of resilience
Yeah.
and one of just like not giving up, just just persistence, just will, and just exercising your will season after season.
Yeah, just one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Yeah, and that's, I feel that way. I'm not growing anything. I'm creating content, out the wazoo every week. And it's one of those things where it can feel very isolating, where I'm like, okay, I'm not out in the community. I'm not out with my people, going to these, dinners and, these big fancy, females to the front. I didn't have time to go to females to the front. I mean, I didn't have the budget to get to LA for females to the front. Or where was it?
Yeah, Palm Springs.
Okay. And, so there's things
It's a
like that
lot.
where I can feel isolated because I'm like, oh, I have a show to put out on Tuesday. I got to stay here this weekend or whatever. And so it is knowing that what I'm doing is a service to our community and that, I'm playing the long game and that the payout will come. But like right now, I'm just like, I'm getting paid to write for other people while I'm, trying to build up the subscriber base to the podcast. And, there's all the grind and, not a lot of the fun bits, but it's like at some point there will be the harvest, so to speak, for what I'm doing in my space. So yeah, you just got to keep your head down and keep going.
Absolutely. I mean, what's happening in cannabis right now, it's really like testing our devotion. I think this plant is testing our devotion, daily. And
I believe you're right.
and it's also tasking us with getting to know ourselves in a way where we have to get to know our priorities. Like what are your priorities and how much discipline are you willing to exercise to like stick to what you need to do in order to continue getting traction and gaining momentum, because this is like, it really does feel like a purposeful pursuit. Like this is the time in life when this plant is starting to emerge and really become accepted on a massive global scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and reemerge.
And reemerge. Thank you very much. I mean, it's like it's this ancient plant, and because of what it went throughout history, it's emerging like this incredible, beautiful butterfly after being in this kind of cocoon that gets passed around the world.
And I also think too that cannabis is opening that gate for all of the other psychedelics, and so. Soon I want to be talking more about psilocybin and having some of those experiences and sharing that with the audience because, I'm grateful to live in a progressive place like Oakland who has, said we've decriminalized all, Okay, yes. I'm like, there's a technical term that's not coming to mind.
Entheogens. It's a good word.
And, and I think everybody could benefit from psilocybin assisted therapy. I mean, there's so much. And I think cannabis really is just this like diva that's busting through the doors and is like, all right, people, let's get this party started.
That's right. I think that she is a door opener and also a bridge builder. And it's incredible what's about to happen. I mean, to kind of go back to the whole idea of intuition and intuitive knowledge or inherent knowledge, it feels like what's happening right now is that culturally and globally, we're kind of confronting the fact that the modern way is not working. And if we were to dig back and go into some ancient knowledge, we'll find that humanity has been here for a very long time. Yet the influence that we're all living by daily is incredibly recent, like by some hundreds of years.
Right.
It's a very brief period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it feels like there's a lot of healing that needs to happen from the mistakes, major, massive mistakes that have been made. And also the key being, if everybody gets a bit closer to themselves and then to each other, if there's like intimacy that is shared through this plant, and we start trusting plant medicine as teacher and plant medicine as healer, like it feels like we could make strides.
Absolutely. And I feel like Moon-Made Farms had to have come from some bit of that. Like, I call my nephew a wizard because he's like all about the planets and the moon and, and your birth chart and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, I want to know if there's any sort of a tie with Moon-Made.
Well, years ago, when I was first living up here, I walked out in the middle of the night into a room that was surrounded by windows, and the room was flooded by blue light, and so bright that it was just like it could have been, early morning, like bright. And I walked outside and I just saw everything with full visual clarity under this, like, bathing in this blue light. And so I had just started working with this plant and knowing that this plant is photosensitive. So what triggers the maturity in the plant is the light cycle. And so I started putting it together like, well, how does the night cycle affect this plant? And then the subtleties of the night cycle, and then the regular subtleties of the night cycle. So I looked up farming by the moon and found lunar farming, and then started practicing lunar farming. So started using a lunar calendar to farm by. And that also enabled me to have some structure to start figuring out, just understanding how to take on like growing plants.
Yeah. Do you hear that?
I do hear that. How is it now?
I think it's gone.
It was a
Yeah, just a little crackle.
little connection.
Well, yeah, Arnav will fix that, but as long as it goes away, he'll be, you're welcome, Arnav. But that's super exciting. So tell me a little bit about how you farm off the lunar calendar.
Yeah. So depending upon where the moon cycle is when you crack your seeds, or when you harvest, or when you might harvest weeds. And one of the explanations for this, or pull weeds, you're not,
Okay.
I mean, some people eat, there are a lot of weeds that we consider weeds that are totally edible, amazing plants, and that have medicinal value. And
I'm learning this from my sister and her wife, who are really into all the herbalist stuff. And I'll get, what's the stinging nettles? That was,
nettles are amazing.
I didn't know anything about it. Now I'm drinking tea, so I'm like, I'm learning things all the time that it's like, oh yeah, that's not bad. That's actually really healthy for us. Or moringa,
Love
all this
Love
stuff,
it.
all these superfoods that I knew nothing about. And, but yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah, it's so good. And once again, it's like it's already there. It's ancient. And like, these are plants that people have used for thousands and thousands of years. And so going back to the moon for just a second, the idea is that if you visualize this, right, when the moon is waxing, if you imagine the moon is like drawing in, right?
Right.
And then when the moon is waning, you imagine that, I'm sorry, it's opposite. Hold on, let's strike that.
Okay. Got it. Wax on, wax off. Wane on, wane off.
Wane on, wane off. Okay, so when the moon is waxing, the moon is exhaling.
Okay.
Then when the moon is waning, the planet is, okay, I'm going to start over. When the moon is waxing, the earth is exhaling.
Okay.
When the moon is waning, the earth is inhaling.
Okay.
Right? And so if you imagine like water in the earth during a waning moon, and a horticulturist taught me this years ago, If you pull weeds, or if you just like cut weeds, or a plant that you don't want to, you want it to stop growing during a waning moon, and you chop it at the base of the plant where it meets the roots, it will not grow back. But if you do this during a waxing moon, it will grow back. And that's because the water is receding during a waning moon. But during a waxing moon, right?
Fascinating.
It's coming up to the surface.
All right. That's good trivia. That's a hot tip. So, yeah, you really need to pay attention to those I mean, if you just pay attention to the natural world in general, you are bound to find these sorts of synergies. And so if you go seeking it, or, you want to learn more, is there some kind of brain trust where all the cannabis farmers kind of either maybe it's someplace online or someplace where you just go to find all this information or to ask questions or to share stuff? Is there something like that exists that y'all use?
There are a lot of books. I've got a shelf of books that I'll refer to from time to time. And really, I think that talking to, other farmers is just the way to go. And utilizing online resources, though forums, not necessarily.
Well, so if you don't live somewhere where there are cannabis farmers, you just have to listen to Casually Baked, the podcast.
That's right. This is the spot.
That's right. This is the hot spot for all of that.
Start doing an education series, how-to series.
I mean, I feel like my whole show is a how-to series. But the Voices of Harvest, I am getting perspectives from all of these farmers while all this stuff is fresh on their mind and they're kind of in the thick of it. They're in the weeds right now.
Oh, yeah. Something about this plant or one of the ways that I just got hooked is that it's really vigorous. And
by that, you mean like it'll just grows like a weed, or what do you mean?
Meaning there are times during the year when it's going through like rapid growth. And so if you leave for, say, 3 days, if you don't see a plant for 3 days and come back to see it, it will have grown inches. It's expressing in a totally different way. Like its bud formation is like completely different.
Got it. John actually was saying that, like he had gone out of town and came back and he was like, we were in a field and he was like, I haven't seen these plants in 7 days. Like, wow.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And it's also just like, and that's how I know I'm in love with this plant, is because I don't want to leave. Like I have a really hard time being away from these plants. And one of the, like I have these kind of mottos that I like to live by on the farm. And one of them is living things come first. And another is have eyes on every plant every day. Yeah. And another is this plant favors consistency. Yeah. It's like all of these things about this plant. It's like, and it's basically like how to love this plant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of it is about like the human touch and the experience of like being in relationship, like physically spending time and like sharing space with this plant.
Mm-hmm. Do you talk to your plants?
We talk, we riff. We also will, we'll mind meld,
Yeah.
I do a lot of just like, kind of a lot of glowing compliments, sending a lot of love and golden light. I'll push a lot of golden light towards the plants.
Well, since you're a musician too, do you play music when you're out in the field?
I used to, and I
don't mean like you playing the drums in the field. I mean like having music on to play for the girls while y'all are working.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And I used to do that a lot, and I have played a bit, in the field or in the we have small terraces.
Okay.
Right, so they're like tiny little terraces all over the place. Like
little pockets where we can sit and enjoy ourselves when we're done here.
Absolutely.
Okay,
it's a hike. It's terrace farming.
Yeah.
Keeps you in shape.
Yeah.
But and so I used to play a lot of music, and then at a certain point I got really into silence with the plants. And so my favorite thing is to be in the gardens in silence and then just to listen and to use to use hearing. Yeah. It's one of my senses to be able to get a sense of what's going on. And when I really tuned into that is when I started noticing what different sounds were like when I was watering. And so if I water and I'm not really hearing anything, I'm like, what's going on? And then I'll start searching. There's a certain sound I want to hear when I'm watering that tells me that everything is moving,
Interesting.
that the soil is alive.
Talk about being present. That's a great exercise.
It's a fantastic exercise. Another one is walking through the woods, and I like to harvest forest mycelium.
Mm-hmm.
And so digging underneath and like finding just the right, like there's a certain time of year when the mycelium is just right. And I want to put that I want to soil build with it, and I want to make tea with it. And I wanted I also just like love to smell it. It's incredible and sweet and like nourishing just to smell.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I can find that is by like what that sounds like and what it feels like to my feet.
Wow. You have gotten
And-
super in tune.
I've gotten into it. I am.
Yeah.
I'm totally like, I've been trying to tune in, and I know that I'm just cracking the surface. Like at 13 years, I'm just starting to get a sense. And it's getting more and more interesting, where everything that I'm looking at, now I want to peel back the layers like a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
like the broad strokes before, and now I just kind of want to peel it back more. Like, and what's happening in the trees, what's happening in the ground, what's happening like with all of these annuals, what's happening with the perennials, what's happening with what I grow here, what grows here and what doesn't grow here. And so much of that is about place, and it's about source. And that, I think, eventually, like what is the hum and the frequency of this land?
Mm-hmm.
And then how does that translate into the flower? And then how does that translate into whoever's absorbing the flower, ingesting the flower? And then what do they do with that in the world?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Right.
like the
That
piece
resonance
of it all.
piece.
Yeah.
And that's what and so I love to like imagine when I'm working with the plants, like I love to imagine somebody smoking a joint
Yeah.
and then like writing a song or just like having a quiet moment or going out and being social,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
like feeling inspired, like
Yeah.
feeling uplifted and inspired and engaged with living, like actually living,
Yeah.
No,
No, and that's, I wanted to live an inspired life and allow myself, the way I walk and move through the world, to inspire others to want to, elevate their game and do that in their own way. And you absolutely are doing that here. Do you have any advice for female growers or, people that are wanting to, kind of regroup and kind of change the way they are approaching their relationship to cannabis? Do you have any
yeah,
parting
totally.
words?
I think that the most important thing to do is to look inward and to get a sense of how you want to contribute. Like what you have and what about you is unique that you want to share with the world. And to really focus on that. And then to figure out what tools do you need to be able to express that fully.
Yeah. And to lean on your community, like do all of those things, but like, I can't do it all by myself. And,
Don't be afraid to reach out. This is another thing, and I think it's so important for women, which is don't be afraid to reach out if you're interested in something.
yeah.
And just assert yourself and go for it and start getting to know your direction.
Well, and you don't know your direction until you start moving. And, and if you start going someplace and it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right, well, then that's the wrong direction. So turn and walk a different direction. But you have to be moving. You have to be, I love to say do it or don't, but do. And that, it's like, it doesn't even matter what it is. Just start. Just do it and you'll figure it out.
Just start. It's so much about momentum, A body in motion stays in motion. A body at rest remains at rest, right?
Yeah.
And
Physics, baby.
it's physics, come on. And I think that it's so about just like just believing in yourself to just activate whatever that is, just to embrace life.
I love it. All right. So if people want to stay inspired by what you're doing, how can they find you on social?
At Moon Made Farms on Instagram.
Okay.
And
Do you have and your
let's riff.
website?
And the website is www.moonmadefarms.com.
Right on. And I love the marketing materials you've been doing. You've got some great merch, great T-shirts, and people can find all this stuff on your website.
Oh yeah, we've got a shop on the website, and you can get your latest like Emerald Triangle fashions.
Yeah.
Yeah, get down.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out. I love it, and I'm excited to go now walk through the farm.
Thank
it's like
you.
the perfect time of day to do this, right, Claire? All right, good deal.
I'm a huge fan of Casually Baked, so I appreciate you coming out here. And this is fun. And here you are at in the heart of the Emerald Triangle.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's getting a little windy. I'm going to have to put on some sleeves before we go down to the farm.
Let's go walk around some terrace gardens.
Yes. All right, cool.
Time together.
Casually Baked, the podcast, was created, recorded, and produced by yours truly. Editing and sound design are in the capable hands of Arnav Gupta. La Osa is in the house capturing and editing the video version of the podcast, available on YouTube and channel 203 on Cannabis Club TV.